Reading Explorer, Unit 4, Violent Earth. Reading B, 4B, Is Prediction Possible? On page 64 in your textbook, you will see a map. And before you read this chapter, before you read this selection, there's a little true and false quiz, and see if you can take that quiz and see if you can get any answers correct. I think you can. Look at the map. You can see where the violent earth takes place, the earthquake zones of the world. And you can see that Los Angeles is in an earthquake zone. Do you come from an earthquake zone? All right. Is prediction possible? Never before have so many people been packed into cities, places such as Los Angeles, Istanbul, Tokyo, and Lima, that are regularly affected by earthquakes. Located near the edge of Earth's huge shifting plates, these cities face the risk of serious damage and economic disaster from large quakes, as well as the tsunamis, fires, and other kinds of destruction they cause. We understand earthquakes better than we did a century ago. Scientists would like to be able to predict them, but is this possible? Today, some of the simplest questions about earthquakes are still difficult to answer. Why do they start? What makes them stop? Perhaps the most important question scientists need to answer is this: are there clear patterns in earthquakes, or are they basically random and impossible to predict? In Japan, government scientists say they have an answer to the question. We believe that earthquake prediction is possible, says Koshun Yamaoka, a scientist at the Earthquake Research Institute at the University of Tokyo. In fact, Japan has already predicted where its next great earthquake will be: the region of Tokai, southwest of Tokyo. Here, two plate boundaries have generated huge earthquakes every 100 to 150 years, but there hasn't been a major quake here since 1854. The theory is that stress is building up in this zone, which could lead to a massive quake. Unfortunately, this is more a forecast than a prediction. It's one thing to say that an earthquake is likely to happen in a high-risk area. It's another to predict exactly where and when the quake will occur. The desire for a precise prediction of time and place has led to another theory, the idea of pre-slip. Naoyuki Kato, a scientist at the Earthquake Research Institute, says his laboratory experiments show that before a fault in the Earth's crust finally breaks and causes an earthquake, it slips just a little. If we can detect these early slips taking place deep in the Earth's crust, we may be able to predict the next big quake. Clues in the desert. Scientists working in Parkfield, California, are also trying to see if predicting earthquakes is possible. They've chosen the town of Parkfield not only because the San Andreas Fault runs through it, but because it's known for having earthquakes quite regularly. approximately every 22 years. In the late 1980s, scientists in Parkfield decided to study the fault to see if there were any warning signs prior to a quake. To do this, they drilled deep into the fault and set up equipment to register activity. Then they waited for the quake. Year after year, nothing happened. When a quake did finally hit on September 28, 2004, it was years off schedule. But most disappointing was the lack of warning signs. Scientists reviewed the data, but could find no evidence of anything unusual preceding the quake. It led many to believe that perhaps earthquakes are really It led many to believe that perhaps earthquakes really are random events. Instead of giving up, though, scientists in Parkfield dug deeper into the ground. By late summer 2005, they had reached the fault's final depth of 3 kilometers, where they continued collecting data, hoping to find a clue. And they found something. In an article published in the July 2008 journal Nature, the researchers in Parkfield claimed to have detected small changes in the fault shortly before an earthquake hit. What had they noticed? Just before a quake, the cracks in the fault had widened slightly. Scientists registered the first changes 10 hours before an earthquake of 3.0 on the Richter scale hit. They identified identical signs 2 hours before a 1.0 quake, demonstrating that perhaps the pre-slip theory is correct. In other words, it may in fact be possible to predict an earthquake. Although there is still a long way to go, it appears from the research being done all over the world that earthquakes are not entirely random. If this is so, in the future we may be able to track the Earth's movements and design early warning systems that allow us to predict when a quake will happen, and in doing so, prevent the loss of life. Then you will see on page 66 and 67, a city. Parts of it look like San Francisco. I don't know if it's all San Francisco. I think it's just a lot of different things that appear in cities. Building for protection. In many of the world's at-risk cities, new structures are designed to survive earthquakes. However, for older structures, engineers need to innovate. These changes help to make the structures stronger, which will reduce damage and allow for quicker repairs. So when you build new buildings in places like Los Angeles, builders plan for the possibility of earthquakes. And old buildings, sometimes they are rebuilt to plan for earthquakes. At the bottom, you see a list of things that can be done. Bolted foundations is number 1. Wood-framed homes can be attached to foundations using long steel bolts. This makes them less likely to collapse. Number 2, flexible joints. Adding flexible joints can allow tunnels to bend. Shock absorbers. Larger buildings can be separated from their foundations and placed on steel and rubber pads. This helps the building better absorb strong shock waves. Number 4 is utility protectors. Tubes added around water pipes and electrical cables can move when the ground moves. This prevents damage to key utilities and makes repairs easier. Number 5, microfiles and mesh. Microfiles, or long pipes, inserted through the foundations as well as steel mesh wrapped around the columns, can make bridges and overpasses more flexible. Number 6, steel skeletons. Steel skeletons attached to inner walls allow skyscrapers to sway without breaking. So these are the things that can be done to buildings to make it easier for the buildings to survive an earthquake. Buildings, big buildings, small buildings, homes, etc. Waves of destruction on page 67. An earthquake's waves come in two forms. P waves, yellow, arrive fastest and compress and punch the rock. S waves, red, are slower but more destructive. They move from side to side to shake and destroy buildings. At the ground level, P and S waves combine to produce surface waves that crack windows and even destroy bridges. So you can see the P waves and S waves with the red arrow and the yellow arrow. So that's the reading for this chapter, 4b. I think you may want to read it again without the video and work on the vocabulary and work on the questions that I'm giving you, and then read it again with the video.